I told my manager I'd walked into a cabinet door. She didn't argue. She just quietly showed me a photo a coworker had texted her an hour earlier, my face, the timestamp, and a message that said, "Something's wrong. I think we need this." My name is Dana Whitfield, and I'm 31 years old. 2 years ago, I would have told you my marriage was ordinary, not perfect, but ordinary. The kind of marriage where you argue about dishes and forget anniversaries sometimes and still fall asleep holding hands more nights than not. That's what I believed, right up until the morning my husband split my lip open with the back of his hand because I told him I wasn't quitting my job. I met Marcus Doyle when I was 24. He was funny in a way that made rooms lighter, the kind of person who remembered the name of your barista and asked about her kids the next time. Everyone loved him. My mother loved him. My best friend Priya loved him so much she cried at our wedding harder than I did. For the first 3 years, I would have told you he was the safest place I knew. The change didn't come all at once. It came in small, deniable pieces, the way water gets into a foundation before anyone notices the cracks. It started with comments about my job. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics firm downtown, the kind of job with predictable hours and a decent salary and, more importantly, people who knew me outside the walls of my house. Marcus worked in sales for a company that had been quietly struggling for 2 years, and somewhere in there, his confidence started leaking out of him and landing on me instead. "You don't need to work so much," he'd say, like it was concern. "I make enough for both of us." Then it became, "I don't like how late you're getting home." Then it became silence when I walked in the door, a silence that sat in the kitchen like a held breath until I apologized for something I hadn't done. I didn't tell anyone how bad it had gotten, because for a long time it wasn't really anything you could describe without sounding dramatic. He never hit me. He raised his voice sometimes. He sulked. He'd go quiet for a day and make the whole house feel like it was holding its breath. I told myself every marriage had a version of this. I told myself I was lucky because he never hit me. Then, on a Tuesday in March, that stopped being true. It started the night before, over dinner I'd made, and he barely touched. I mentioned, carefully, that my manager wanted me to lead a new client onboarding project. It was a promotion in everything but title, the kind of assignment that usually came with a raise attached 6 months later. I was proud of it. I made the mistake of sounding proud of it out loud. "You're really going to take on more hours," he said. "Not a question." "It's not more hours, it's just more responsibility," I said. "It's a good opportunity, Marcus." He set his fork down slowly, the way he did when he wanted me to notice the gesture. "I've been telling you for a year I want you home more. I want us to actually build something. And you keep choosing that place over me. I'm not choosing anything over you. I'm trying to build something too. My career is part of building something." "Your career," he repeated, like the word tasted wrong in his mouth. I should have let it go there. I'd learned, without ever admitting to myself that I'd learned it, exactly how far I could push a conversation with him before it turned. But I was tired, and I was proud of the project, and some stubborn part of me refused to shrink that night. "I'm not quitting my job, Marcus. I never said I would." He didn't answer. He just picked his plate up, scraped it hard into the sink, hard enough that I heard the fork clatter against the porcelain, and walked out of the kitchen. I remember standing there thinking, at least it's over. I didn't know yet that he was only rearranging the fight, not ending it. The next morning, I was running late, which never helped anything with Marcus. I was standing at the bathroom mirror finishing my makeup when he appeared in the doorway. He didn't say good morning. He said, "Did you think about what I said?" "Marcus, I have to leave in 10 minutes. "That's not an answer. I told you last night, I'm not quitting." He crossed the room faster than I expected, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath, and said, low and flat, "You're choosing them over me, again." "I'm choosing myself," I said, and I don't know why those 4 words were the ones that broke something in him, but they were. His hand came across my face before I even registered him raising it. Not a slap exactly, the back of his knuckles, quick and hard, and my head snapped sideways into the doorframe. I tasted copper before I felt the pain. My lip split against my teeth, and I stood there with one hand pressed to my mouth, blood already sliding warm between my fingers, staring at him in a kind of silence that had no room in it for shock, because some numb part of me realized I had been braced for this for longer than I wanted to admit. He looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. Then he said, "You made me do that." As if the sentence explained anything, as if it undid anything. I didn't cry. I remember that clearly, because I expected myself to, and instead I just went very still and very quiet, the way you do when your body decides logic is safer than feeling. I cleaned myself up in the bathroom while he stood in the hallway saying my name like an apology he didn't know how to finish. I told him I had to go to work. He didn't stop me. In the car, I looked at my lip in the visor mirror at every red light. It was swollen, split cleanly enough that it had already started to bruise along the edge. By the time I got to the office, I had a story ready, the kind of story that comes out of you almost on instinct when you've spent 2 years learning how to make yourself smaller and more convenient. I walked into my manager's office and said I'd walked into the corner of a cabinet door that morning, half asleep, clumsy, laughed a little at myself, the way you're supposed to when you're selling an accident. My manager's name was Denise Alvarez. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of boss who ran her team with equal parts warmth and no patience for excuses. She looked at me for a long moment, longer than the joke deserved, and I felt my stomach drop the way it does when you know someone isn't buying what you're selling. She didn't argue with me. She didn't call me a liar. She just turned her monitor slightly and said, "Dana, sit down for a second." On her screen was a text message thread and a photo. The photo was of me from the previous evening, standing at my car in the office parking garage before I'd driven home. My coworker, a soft-spoken analyst named Marisol Duarte, had taken it without me realizing, catching me in profile as I fumbled with my keys. In the photo, my lip was untouched, unmarked. Beneath it, time-stamped 6:15 the evening before, was a second message Marisol had sent that morning after seeing me walk in, a photo taken candidly across the office, my swollen lip visible even through the low quality of a phone camera, time-stamped 8:40 that same morning. Underneath both photos, Marisol had written to Denise, "Something's wrong. I think we need this." I stared at the two images side by side, the girl from 6:15 the evening before, with an unmarked mouth, and the woman from 8:40 the next morning with a split lip already darkening at the edge. And something about seeing it laid out like that, undeniable and factual, broke through whatever numbness had been holding me together in the car. "Dana," Denise said gently, "you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to tell me, but I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I know what a cabinet door looks like, and I know what this looks like. And I need you to know that whatever is happening, you don't have to handle it by yourself." I don't remember deciding to tell her. I remember the words coming out of me like something that had been dammed up for 2 years finally found a crack to escape through. I told her about the fight over dinner. I told her about the doorway. I told her about the last 2 years, in pieces out of order, the way trauma comes out of people who've never said it out loud before. Denise didn't interrupt. She listened with her hand resting flat on the desk, like she was steadying herself for my sake more than hers. When I finished, she didn't tell me what to do. She asked me what I wanted to do, which was a different question, and one nobody had asked me in a long time. I told her I didn't know. She said that was allowed. What she did next mattered more than any single thing she said. She quietly pulled our HR director into a private conversation and had our company's employee assistance coordinator reach out to me directly, not through a mass email, but a real phone call from a woman named Teresa who specialized in workplace support for domestic violence situations, something I hadn't even known our company offered until that day. Teresa didn't push. She gave me information. She told me about a local advocacy organization that could help with a protective order if I ever wanted one, and she made it clear that my job, the very thing Marcus had hit me over, was not at risk because of any of this. I didn't go home that night. I told Marcus I was staying with Priya to think, which was true, except I left out that Priya had already made 2 calls before I even arrived at her apartment, one to a friend of hers who was a family law attorney, and one to the same advocacy line Teresa had mentioned. I sat at Priya's kitchen table that night with an ice pack against my mouth, listening to her tell me, calmly, that I didn't have to decide everything at once. I just had to decide the next right thing. The next right thing was filing for an emergency protective order 3 days later, with Marisol's photos and Denise's written statement as part of the documentation. Marcus tried calling me 11 times that week. I didn't answer. He showed up at Priya's building once, and she was the one who told him, through the intercom, that if he came back, she'd call the police, and that she meant it. The divorce process took 9 months. It wasn't dramatic in the way people sometimes imagine these things. No courtroom shouting, no final confrontation with a neat cinematic ending. It was mostly paperwork and waiting rooms, and Marcus's lawyer occasionally trying to frame the split lip as an isolated incident, an aberration, a man under stress. My attorney countered with 2 years of half-buried patterns finally given language, Priya's testimony about the calls she used to get from me late at night, my own recollection laid out chronologically for the first time in my life, instead of scattered and minimized. Marcus never really apologized, not in a way that meant anything. He sent one long message a few weeks after I left, explaining that he'd been under pressure at work, that he'd never meant for it to go that far, that he loved me. I read it once and didn't respond. Some explanations aren't apologies. They're just excuses wearing a nicer outfit. I still work at the same company. Denise still checks in on me sometimes, not in a way that feels like pity, just in the way people do when they've been part of something significant in your life. Marisol and I are closer now than we ever were before that photo, though we've never needed to talk much about why. Some bonds don't require explanation once they've been earned. I moved into a small apartment 8 months ago, the first home that has ever belonged only to me. I painted the walls a colour Marcus would have hated, something too bright and too confident for the version of myself I used to be. I kept my job. I got the promotion I almost lost a marriage over, the one that turned out, in the end, to have nothing to do with why any of this happened, because it was never really about the job at all. It was about control, and the job was just the excuse he found that week. Sometimes people ask me how I finally left, as if there was one clean, decisive moment where courage simply arrived. The truth is quieter than that. The truth is that a coworker noticed something on an ordinary Tuesday morning and cared enough to send a message instead of looking away. The truth is that a manager chose to believe evidence over a convenient lie, gently enough that I didn't feel accused, only seen. I didn't save myself alone. I was seen by people willing to look closely enough to notice, and that noticing gave me the room to finally tell the truth out loud. I think about that photo sometimes, the one from 6:15 the evening before, my face unmarked, ordinary, tired from a long day. I think about how close I came to explaining away what happened the next morning, how easily I walked into a cabinet door, could have become the story everyone accepted, including me. It almost was. It wasn't because somebody looked twice.